Welcome back. Well, according to Trellix, one of the world's most advanced and intelligent cybersecurity organization for enterprises, here there's no more time for South Africa's organizations to place cyber defense on the list of their highest business priorities. To assist in informing this, they have released their 2023 cybersecurity predictions that revealed a heightened hackativism and geopolitical cyber attacks this year. And to tell us more about these forecast threats in 2023, we're now joined via Zoom by their country lead, Carlo Bolzonello. Carlo, a very good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sipiwe. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Now, let's start with what hackativism is and geopolitical cyber attacks are.
So the two are quite different. Hacktivism, in the most simplest form, is people looking to leverage businesses by breaching organizations, if you can put it that way, right?
Yeah.
And then the other side of things is, when we talk about disinformation campaigns and things like that, that's a very different, but it's very specific to the way it's delivered. But that is, trying to influence a population or a subset or individuals, whatever the case being, into, their mindset looking at a certain narrative and not looking at the rest. So that's definitely on the rise, and we've seen that globally.
Now, let's go through some of the predictions, starting with geopolitics and the grey zone conflict.
So we've seen an uptick, and I think most people would have, seen this. If you're on social media, you'll definitely see this since February 28th last year, when the war in Ukraine broke out between Russia and Ukraine. And so what we've been monitoring, and this, we've seen this before, and there's been tales of this sort of with the US, with their elections. I'm sure people have heard about election interference, and that's predominantly, but we've seen an uptick in that now, especially with this conflict with Ukraine and Russia. And what we're seeing is, two narratives. One is, trying to justify one side, and so behind that is generally, it's not predominantly people, it's what we call bot farms that are generating data to change perceptions. And so we've seen that, that's on the rise, and it's starting to rise a lot more as this conflict in Ukraine. And that's the number one we see at the moment. As that continues, so we're starting to see that. But that's not specific just to that. It can be to anything, right? If you want to change a narrative in a specific country and you want to use disinformation, that's, social media is probably the best platform, because people don't research anymore. People, one of the biggest challenges is, and I'll give you an example. So if I follow you, Simpiwe, and you have and how it works is I follow you on Facebook and Twitter, or whatever the case being, and people see you as a trusted leader.
Yes.
So they assume that you've done the groundwork. Now you put something out there, and your million followers believe you without actually doing any validation of
Right.
And so this snowballs, right? Just becomes the de facto story. And so that's how these disinformation campaigns really get going. And it's quite novel, but that's the way they're sort of going. So we are seeing that, and we think we'll see a lot more as unfortunately the conflict is sort of the linchpin, and things are starting to break off from that. So we're starting to see a lot of that happening now globally as well.
So how is hackativism, expected to take center stage this year?
So, we're seeing an uptick, and I think the challenge is predominantly is that everybody has the internet, right? So everybody wants to learn, and everybody's seen TV series like Mr. Robot, and the coolness that comes with it. But it's experimental as well, and so there's a big drive for people to actually go and do this hacktivism piece, right? And hacktivism has many sort of heads, but predominantly I think what we're definitely seeing is an uptick, because it's seen as the cool thing to be doing, is to try to break into something, trying to get money for free or tokens for free for something. So there is definitely an uptick in that. And because it is also linked in some ways to this geopolitical sort of state we're in globally, that is on the increase because, again, if we go back to that previous statement where you've got, different sides trying to sell a narrative, people get quite emotional about it, and so they'll climb in and try and assist, call it, their side in getting the truth out there, if you want to call it. So we're starting to see a lot more of that now.
And I suppose one of the interesting predictions is the increase in activity by teen cyber criminals. Expand more on this.
So, we're seeing, as I said to you earlier, we're seeing a lot more young people get involved in and maybe minor incidents, or it's curiosity driven, but there's definitely an uptick, and it's things like, I'll give you an example. Online gaming, you get rewards, you get sort of tokens, but you have to work for it or you have to buy it, right? People want to circumvent it, and the youngsters today, and I'll say youngsters, and that's it's a broad group, but the information is freely available on the internet. So researching, trying, testing, and then they want to get things like that right, but it can expand further beyond that, where it becomes quite malicious. So, interests, say people want to go or young people want to see what a vulnerability looks like. Can I get into, some government entity? Can I get into the bank? Can I get into whatever the case be, my girlfriend's Gmail account? Makes no difference, but they will try. And so we've seen that is starting to rise now, more predominantly as it's starting to take place.
Okay. Let's now look at space hacking and the kind of compromise of satellites and, the other space assets that you say will increase and become more public in 2023.
So what we predict is, as things like, companies like SpaceX start to launch more and more, as we start to see taking satellites to space and private companies are more involved, private individuals versus government has they're up there for different reasons. Private entities, is up there to make some money. But the challenge we have is that with everything today, anything that has a computer or is driven by a computer, nothing is 100% secure. So, once what we believe is going to start happening as space becomes more and more of the normal conversation piece, people or individuals or groups will try and actually breach things like satellites or something like that that's based in space, and there's implications to that, right? So there's the knock-on effect there could be things like a knockout of telecommunications, vision. It's quite a large, the impact would be massive to us. But again, we're starting to see the slight nutterings of this coming, and then that's just the norm, right? It's like when everybody was, and I think it's to the next point as well, is you've got everybody wants to connect your house to the internet, to your mobile phone, so you can turn on the lights before you get home, turn on the dishwasher, whatever the case be, because that's what we were sold, right? This connected house.
Yes.
And so the threats, and that's IoT, and so the threats there are similar. That sort of started there and it's originated there and it's started to move to any other plane because everything's connected today.
Okay, and you also mentioned that there will be a huge jump in reverse phishing or voice phishing attacks, yeah?
Yeah, so that's predominantly, we haven't seen much of that in South Africa, but we've seen a lot of that in the US, where, you get, it's very similar to, how it works is that, it's a voice recording. They phone you, you have a conversation with them. It could be about anything. But then eventually the idea is to get things like your bank details, your credit card details, a lot of information about you from a sort of automated dialing system. We would have, I think in the South African context, you would see it as, and we're seeing it a little bit, but we haven't seen the phishing piece yet that I'm aware of. But that's the concept, is that hacking or malicious groups will start to set these up and phone you and sort of call back, trying to sell you insurance or whatever the case being, but they're leveraging you for your information to eventually do something bigger with you.
All right, Carlo, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I suppose this is very, very worrying and concerning, especially with the news that, the likelihood of domains scaling this year. But thank you so much for sharing such information with us.
Thanks a million for having me. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you. Thanks, Carlo. That was Carlo Bolzonello, and he's been speaking to us about Trellix predictions of how heightened hackativism and geopolitical cyber attacks can be expected in 2023.